Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Dear students and colleagues, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. It's a great pleasure to be in the next class with you, discussing the new topic. As you remember, our previous topic was on balance sheet. We discussed that a balance sheet is actually developed after the income statement in order to see the financial position of a business. What actually our focus point in a balance sheet is, we try to see that whether the liability in the owner's equity side is equal with the asset side, right? We see it has to be equal in order to show that the both sides are properly balanced, and in the situation of a business is going in the right direction. We discussed some important account types and their details in order to have a very quick overlook of what we have studied in the beginning semesters at BBA. So we talked about assets, we talked about other parts of the assets, the kinds of assets we have. We discussed liabilities, types of liability, kinds of liabilities, whatever is part of the liability. We talked about owner's equity or capital, and what is part of the owner's equity or capital. We discussed if the owner's investment increases in the business, it gives a very good revenue to the business. And we said that if a lot of payments are made to the owners, it increases the expenses of the business, and which means that we are not going at the right direction in the business. So in the meanwhile, we had an example solved. This is an example, a sample for a balance sheet. We see the asset side, we see the liability and shareholders or equity side. So both sides you see are equal. Then we solved a practical question on this. You could see in this Excel sheet the practical question that we first solved an income statement question, and then we took that question into practice to the balance sheet. And that was a very easy example of how balance sheet is solved or how balance sheet is created, right? So you see, this is the asset side. We have everything related to the asset, including the closing stock that is already available with us. And on the liability and owner's equity side, we have, or the capital side, we have the liabilities here. These two are amongst the liabilities, and the remainings are part of the capital that we had. Then we see that while this is 60,000, and you see we have actually 10,500, and then we added up, we had 85,000, and similarly in this. So we see that a balance sheet is created. So this was the whole thing that we discussed about income statement and balance sheet. In today's class, we'll be discussing, as I said, statement of cash flow, right? Or cash flow statement. So both can be named at the same time. We see that a statement of cash flow or cash flow statement, CFS, actually is part of the financial statement after the income statement, after the balance sheet, which summarizes the amount of cash and the cash equivalents that is entering or coming to our company or leaving our company out. Right, so the cash that comes to the business, the cash that leaves our business, the inflows of cash and the outflows. These are two terms that we'll be using in today's class. The inflows or the cash that is coming to our business, right? The business either, you see, comes to business, they have the cash through sales and other stuff, and or they pay to the debtors, they pay to the shareholders, which is the outflow that you are actually paying to others, right? Which is leaving your company. And the entering the company is like the sales that you are making, or the revenues that you are generating. So it shows us that how much cash we have in hand at a specific period of time, right? And how we manage, how a company manages its cash position, and how the company actually generates the cash, which they will later on pay to the debtors, and on which they will actually do their operating expenses properly, right? So three things are mandatory to understand in cash flow statement. The first thing is that the cash operating activities. We will talk about what is part of them later on. The cash from investing activities, the cash that is coming to our business or leaving our business due to the investing activities, and the cash which is coming to our business or leaving our business due to the financing activities. We see a very quick example, which we'll be looking into that later on. Just giving you a quick overlook or a quick look of what operating activities involve, which involves the sales of goods and services, payment to suppliers, payment to employees, factory expenses. So all those things that are part of the operation stuff within the business. So and the fee and commission and etc. Investing, actually, wherever you invest in the business, which is made on sale of fixed assets, purchasing the purchases you make for fixed assets, the sale of investments, the purchasing of investments, and the interest that you receive on the or the dividend you receive on shares or bonds or debentures. In the financing, you issue the issue of shares, the issue of debentures, the redemption of shares, the repayment of shares, the redemption or the repayment of debentures and shares and interest or dividends that you pay. So that is part of it. We see an example here. You could understand that the operating activities are written here. This is the report for a statement of cash flow for example, for 2019. March 31st. So you see that the flow, how operating activities are written, the investing activities are written, how financing activities are written, and how the net cash is brought up, and how the beginning of the year and the end is actually written. So that was the concept we needed to understand. Now we'll go into a detailed example and a detailed explanation of how cash flow works and what it is. We see that the first thing that we need to understand is what is cash flow statement and how we prepare it. We already talked about what it is, but giving you a quick view that in a business we either receive some cash, which is called a cash inflow, or we pay cash to the debtors, to the people to whom we need to pay the cash, right? So the inflow of cash is here, and the inflow of cash is sometimes received by the people called the debtor. So it's very simple to understand that in the business we receive cash from by selling a machinery or some equipment, or we receive cash through the debtors. Or at the meanwhile, this was the inflow, that the cash is coming, while in the outflow we either pay to the creditors or we either purchase stuff. You see, purchasing stuff, we receive some stuff, but actually we are paying to the other party in order to receive that stuff. So that's a key point to understand. So to make this very simple, we could say that cash flow statement is actually a statement which shows the inflow and outflow of a cash and cash equivalent. We will talk about the equivalent later on, of a business during an accounting period. The period could be 6 months, 3 months, 1 year. That could differ, right? So what actually is within it, the point that we have to know the cash inflow and outflow and the cash equivalent, which is in this thing of the cash flow statement. Now, what is cash equivalent? That's a very important question for us. The investments which can be easily converted into cash, having a maturity period less than 3 months, right? When investments are converted easily in less than 3 months period, it is called what? Cash equivalent, right? So we can take an example on this later on as well, and because cash equivalent is part of our course and today's topic, that's why we will be talking about it in details right now, inshallah. Now we will talking about how to prepare the cash flow statement, right? For example, if we say that there on the right on the left hand we have operating activities, on the middle we have investing activities, and financing activities on the other side, right? We already took an example of this before. You see the operating activities are here as we took in the example, which involve sale of goods and services, payment to suppliers, payment to employees, factory expenses, royalty fee, and etc. And at the same time, the investing activities also involve the sale of fixed assets, purchase of fixed assets, we already discussed that, the investments, and etc. And at the same time, financing activities involve issue of shares, and etc. in it, and the redemption and interest. That is all what we have discussed before. One thing we need to understand is that the operating activities involve the activities which are either in cash or cash equivalents, which means which takes less than 3 months, right? While on the investing activities, it should take more than 3 months because they are not cash equivalents, right? And as we took the examples in the slides before about it as well. So you see here, for example, we have sale of fixed assets which are for more than 3 months, and a purchase of fixed assets, etc., and the changes in capital and borrowing that we have discussed. Now we will move forward in order how we can make a cash flow statement. We will go into detail of an example here that I have already solved for you. Wait a second, where was that example? Here. You could see this example that we have already solved the question on cash flow statement. For example, ended for the 31st March 2020, right? So these are the particulars, the details, and the amounts. So we basically write the particulars, or we basically write the descriptions here, we write the details here, and we write the final amounts on the right corner here. So in the first phase we have cash from the operating activities. As we said that it is close to the cash equivalents. So you see the net profit that we had in hand is like 100,000. You see, and then we actually start with adding non-cash and non-operating expenses, in which we have the depreciation, which is part of the non-cash and non-operating expenses, 5,000, and loss of sales of assets, which is 15,000, which we have here. Share discount written off. The discount that is written off is 3,000. Provision of taxation, and that is 2,000, which is written here. So when we add up all of these activities, we come across 5,000, right? 22,500, right? So that is actually what we have in hand. What we have in hand here, which can be called as the step before before we receive the cash and operating expenses and their final amounts. So then we have, after adding up the non-cash and non-operating expenses, now we are non-cash and non-operating incomes, because you see these are actually the amounts that is actually coming to us in one way or the other, right? And now we are reducing. These are the expenses that we are actually making, and then we actually put down the non-cash and non-operating income here. We subtract that from the above amount. So we see the profit on sale of assets. Did I write it the wrong way? Yes. A profit on sale of assets. We see that 30,000 is the profit we have while we sold assets, right? So that is the inflow that is coming to us, and then we have cash flow before changes in working capital, right? Cash flow before changes in working capital. After we work on the working capital, so the cash that is coming to us is 195,000 AFN, right? Now we are adding actually what is increasing in current liabilities in it, we are adding the decrease that is in the current assets, and then we are actually going to subtract the increase in current assets and decrease in current liabilities. So this is a whole lot of formula that the procedure that we are working on. ما چی کردیم که ای ولیو ها را ما اد کردیم و ای ولیو هایی که لیست نوشته شده او را ما ماینس کردیم. یک طریقیشی است که ما مستقیما این را نوشته میکنیم و نیاز به این نیست که ما ماینس نوشته کنیم. یک طریقیشی است که ما این را در قوس بند کنیم که پاسان این را ما شما انجام دادیم. حالا خب به خاطر که چون اینجا فرمولی اپلای شده باز خوب معلوم نمیشه، اما در بخشای بعدی ما انشاءالله که را میفهمیم. Now the cash generated from the operations that we have, we will also talk about later on if that is the cash generated, or for example we have the cash invested or that come, it means that we are on the positive. اگر مثبت بود generated میگیم، increased میگیم، cash flow from میگیم، و اگر مثلا used گفتیم cash used in operation, it means you are on the negative side. Now we are on positive side, that's why we said cash generated from operations, for example. Now what we do is we deduct 1,500 of the taxation that we paid, while the other part, you see, we have subtracted this amount from this, and then we have what? This amount. Right? So that's the other amount we have, 1,98,500, which is cash flow from operating activity, right? We can even remove this used. I only added it for your understanding that if the amount is negative, suppose if this amount is negative, then we would say cash used in operating activities. Now we can say cash flow from operating activities because the cash has come from the operating activities and it is positive, right? Now that was the first thing that we worked on, which was cash from operating activities. Now we talk about cash flow from investing activities, right? This involves purchase of assets, the assets we purchased, and we are on minus. You see, if we put either a minus or we put this in parentheses like this, like these parentheses, it means we are on the negative side, right? Actually, we are minus. Actually, is a sign for outflow, that the money that has gone from us we have paid, right? So the money minus sign is for outflow, and the money when it comes, it is we have a positive sign like here, right? Okay. So the purchase of investments. Again, the money has gone from us. We have paid to somebody 15,000. Sale of assets, you see, it is inflow. I said when there is no sign, it means it's positive. No sign means positive, right? So that is why it is the inflow for us. Sale of investments, again, is a positive sign. Interest received, we have received. Suda receive kardim, it is also a positive sign. Dividend we received, these all are the positive signs. The dividends we received on shares or debentures, फायदे की वजह से over them, it is all the positive sign. Now what we need to do is we have to add up all these four and minus it, subtract it from these two, and this is the same thing we have done, right? You see, ای چهار ارقام جمع کردیم، 4,000 1,000 30,000 50,000 minus 50,000 و 80,000 که امرای ما آمده 45,000 minus 45,000. و ما گفتیم اگر ما minus بودیم ما میگیم که cash flow used in investing activities. مثلا اینجا چون ما مثبت در فایده هستیم، the positive side هستیم، ما گفتیم cash flow from operating activities. اینجا چون ما در minus هستیم، cash flow used in investing activities. I have forgotten to write in it, in investing activity, because we have used it and we are on the minus side. Now the last part is the part for cash flow from financing activities, which is a very mandatory part to understand. So in financing activities, if we have we have issued share of capital, we have received some money on it. That is, you see, the plus side, right? The minus is when we paid for the bonds or debentures, or we have paid for share capital, right? So that is like the outflow we have made. Proceeds from loans, we have taken loans from somebody, so we have received money. Repayments of loan, we paid back, so that is the outflow. That's why it's minus. Interest, we paid interest, it's minus, you see. We paid, that's the outflow. Dividend, we paid on the shares and debentures, it is on the minus side, right? Now you see, what we did actually is we have added up these two values, the positive 1,500,000 and the 20,000. We have added up and we have subtracted the remaining minus amounts. Any amount where there is minus, and we have this amount in hand with us, right? So that was the thing we talked about. And now, in order to know the net increase or decrease, what we actually did is on the two sides we have two values here, right? We have two values here. You see, this value, the cash that is coming to us from the investing activities, right? And the cash that has come to us from the financing activities. ای دو عدده ما ماینس کردیم از چی؟ از ای اماونتی که بر ما از operating activities آمده، از ای اماونت که از operating activities آمده، چون ما outflow ما در اوجا زیاد بود، از او را ماینس کردیم تا که امرای ما عدد 1,33,500 امرای ما آمد. And there is also two statements to understand here. If this is increase, if this is positive, we say net increase in cash or cash equivalent, right? Net increase in cash or cash equivalent. increase جوابی خاطر نوشته کردم که واضح باشه. In cash or cash equivalents. In cash. Did I miss some part? Yes. Net increase in cash or cash equivalents, and if it is like minus اگر منفی ما باشیم, then we write net decrease in cash or cash equivalents. So how we did that? Again, we actually subtracted these two values from the upper value of the cash that we had from operating activities, right? Okay, that was the thing. Now there is one more point to understand. So the other point is actually the question is ended here. Sometimes we are giving two values here in order to understand the importance of it. For example, we are giving the cash and cash equivalent at the beginning of the period, right? So these two values will be given to us in the question. We first take the cash and cash equivalent at the beginning of the period. So when we took this value, and then we do what? We actually add up these two values, right? When we add up these two values, we would look into the result, because this value is already given in the question to us. If we have, so this is for the accuracy, to check the accuracy. بخاطر اینکه که ما چک کنیم که سوال ما درست حل کردیم یا نه. به همین خاطر بر ما اینجا ای دو ولیو را میته. باز ما یک ولیوش میگیریم اینجا the beginning of the year که cash equivalent ما داریم، این ما میگیریم. باز ما شما چی میکنیم که ایرا کتیزی ولیو نت انکریس یا دیکریس که هست، حالا خو انکریس هست چون دو مثبت هست، انکریس هست. ایرا امروزی جمع میکنیم، یک جای میکنیم، ای ولیو آمد. باز همی ولیو هم در کوشن است، به خاطر اینکه سوال ما درست است یا نیست. ای همراه ما همکاری را میکنه که ما بفهمیم که سوال ما درست است یا نیست. اگر عموما ای دو ولیو در کش فلو استیتمنت نمی باشه. با خاطر چک کردن اکوریسی ای را ما می جا آوردم که ما شما واضح باشه که سوال ما شما به شکل درست حل کردیم یا نه. به این خاطر ما ویلیو را اد کردم براتون. و باز بعدن که ای را از اوجا گرفتین، باز ای دو ویلیو را که وقتی که ما اد کردیم، یعنی یک دفعه باز براتون ادش میکنم. مثلا ای دو ویلیو را ما اد کردیم، ببینید باید ریزلتش ای برای و ای هم در اوجا است دیگه. به خاطر اکوریسی که سوال ما درست است یا نیست دیگه، به مو خاطر ما ای را باز میفهمیم. به شکل مختصر we have three parts: the cash from the operating activities, the cash that was the A, the B, the cash from investing activities, and the cash flow from the financing activities, right? We actually do this whole procedure. We add up the values when necessary. If that is the less, we deduct those values, and if in the results we had the positive, we write cash flow from operating activities. In that, if that was negative, we write cash flow from used in operating activities. Then say in the meanwhile we add up where it is necessary to add up, and if this is negative then we minus the values as we have done here. یا ایشان جمع کردیم یا ایش منفی شد. purchase of assets است چون ما پرچیز کردیم، پول دادیم، از ما آوتفلو صورت گرفته، یا پیسه ما شما دادیم، دی به خاطر نگاتیو است، دی پلاس است، ایره که پلاس کردیم و ایره منفی کردیم، ای ولیو کتیم آمد. و یوزد به خاطر نوشته کردیم که در منفی هستیم قسمی که گفتیم. و the financing activity the same thing. We issued share capital, we received this amount, and when we paid for bonds and debentures for the bonds and debenture holders or for the share capital shareholders, we are on the minus because we actually paid. And the proceed from loan, we receive loan, repayment of loan پس که دادیم ما منفی شدیم، interest که پی کردیم، dividend که پی کردیم ما منفی شدیم. بعدا ما شما چی کردیم که ای ولیو و ای ولیو و ای ولیو را پلاس کردیم و ای دو ولیو را امرای زی دو ولیو از اون ماینس کردیم، ما در ماینس شدیم و این خاطر ما یوزد گفتیم. بعدا باز ما شما چی کردیم که ای ولیو را که ما ماینس شدیم و ای ولیو را که ما ماینس شدیم، ای را از ای ولیو که ماینس کردیم، دیدیم ما شما در نت انکریس هستیم و وضعیت قسمی که اوجا گفته بودیم ما به شکل خوب فهمیدیم که چقدر کش بر ما آمد، چقدر کش رفت. به خاطر اکوریسی ما ولیو کش و کش اکویولنت که سر سال بیگینینگ اف پیریود بر ما داده او را کتیزی پلاس میکنیم و ای ولیو هم اوجا است. باز وقتی که دیدیم که ای ولیو آمد سوال ما درست است، اگر نه باز کدام جای ما شما اشتباه کردیم و سوال سر حل میکنیم انشاءالله. So that was the whole lecture. We discussed the statement of cash flow. It summarizes the amount of cash and cash equivalent entering and leaving a company. We have seen this summary here. We have seen the net income. We have seen how much cash is coming. You see this cash is coming, this cash, the negative is leaving. This is inflow. This is the inflow. Inflow means cash is coming. امی هدف ما بود گفتیم که cash equivalent entering or leaving the company. ای enter شد، ای leave میکنه کمپانی را. دیدیم؟ باز ما دیدیم که لیو ما زیاد هست. مثلا دیجم زیاد هست، اما کشی که بر ما آمده از operating activities و کش نسبت به زیاد هست، به خاطر ما net increase داریم. تقریبا 1,03,500 روپا ما net increase داریم. So that was the whole thing, and we see how we manage the cash. چقدر کش ما در هند داریم، در دست داریم، یعنی قدر اینکریز که ما داریم، نت اینکریز قدر ما در دست کش داریم. صحیح. و کشی که در بیگینینگ آف ایر داشتیم بودیم کتش یک جای کردیم 1,20,000 روپا ما نت کش داریم که بر ما شما نت کش آمده. این هم دو سه بخش از structureش بود. the say parts the structure which we have written here. ببینید cash from operating activities ما دیدیم که این ریزالتش آمد و باز cash from the investing activity بود و داخلش باز cash from the financing activities او را هم ما شما گرفتیم. دیگه مثالم کار کردیم، مثال ها رو گرفتیم انشاءالله که بر شما واضح شده باشه. در صنف بعدی انشاءالله ما شما در سه چیز کار میکنیم. کش فلو استیتمنت ما شما که انشاءالله خلاص شد دیگه. در صنف بعدی ما شما روی فاینانشل مارکت گپ میزنیم که چند قسم فاینانشل مارکتس داریم. بعد از اون ما میریم طرف باند والویشن و در او باز نت پرزنت ولیو میایه یا پرزنت ولیو میایه که او چیزا را باز ما شما در صنف بعدی انشاءالله بحث میکنیم. همین بود لکچر امروزی ما. I will put this lecture into your LMS software as well. Please do work on the cash flow statement and balance sheet. If you do come across questions, do not hesitate to ask your questions. And in the next classes, inshallah, we will go a little faster in order to finish our course as soon as possible. But inshallah, you will understand the course as well. This was all for today, my dear friends and fellows. I wish you a best time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.